Okay, folks. If you can see self-driving cars, raise your hand, please. Excellent. Well done, everybody. All right. I thought I would change it up. We've been doing code for a while now. And so this is a great technology. You are growing and living in it. I want to talk a little bit about it and then just one or two webinars on this. And not a super deep dive, but just so you know what's going on with it. You're high schoolers now. You're driving. Let me ask you, how many of you have your license? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you? I'm going to put down. When I get this up here. How many of you can't wait to get your license? Raise your hand. Like, oh man, I just can't wait. Put your hands down. How many of you say, I don't really need my license. If I get it, great, but I don't feel anything about it. Well, that's great to see. How many people? All right, so most everybody either really wants their license or kind of wants it, but nobody's really indifferent. You are the exception, folks. I got one here too. You all are the exceptions. There's been a big swing in driving, self-driving cars. So that's just an impact. What does that mean? And you make an argument that for your parents, for myself, to get out of the house, to be able to talk to my friends, required a car. Now with social media, you don't need a car to talk, hang out with your friends. All right, and we have Uber to get around. All right, and someone's got a permit. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and start working our way through this. History of the automobile. Let's start with the beginning so you just get an idea of what's going on. It's kind of on the left is the very first, what you could start to argue as an automobile. We'll get to it in a moment. On your right is the most current, what we would perceive as the most current automobile, one of the most current, a Tesla. The first car was built by the French, Joseph Cugnot, in 1769. So he built the first car before this country was even formed. What's interesting about that is it represents that the French have a pretty strong background in engineering. Sometimes people surprise me and act like they didn't, but they're the first to come up with hot air balloons. They are competing with the Wright brothers on flight. And in fact, for a while, they thought the Wright brothers were frauds. So the French, because they had a gentleman, it was actually a Spanish gentleman, but living in France, working on the airplane, and they were trying to close in on it. But anyways, this gentleman here builds a steam engine. It's not super practical. He's trying to do this before we really have tracks and trains. You can kind of see with that big laborious big beast that this would lend itself more for a train engine than a self-car. But he's the first to get credit because he was at least conceiving it. Another Frenchman, Lenoir, built the first internal combustion engine. If you have a question, just raise your hand. But he builds the first gas engine. Just point this out to everybody. If you've got a question, let me, raise your hands. But don't use gasoline in fires. They blow up. Gasoline blows up. So don't take it to a campfire to start a campfire. Use white gas or something. Gasoline doesn't burn, it blows up. That's why we use it in gas engines. Because really, ultimately, a gas engine, what you're doing is exploding and pulling in large volumes of air, forcing it through to push the pistons through. Okay, so you're just blowing a lot of hot air. Someone says, hi. Hey, Mateo. We're talking about self-driving cars right now. We're cars, but we're going to get towards self-driving cars. All right, now this is considered the first car powered by an internal combustion engine. And this was done by Carl Benz of, yes, Mercedes-Benz. All right. So Carl's Benz builds what we call a tri-wheel. Now, look at that control for turning it. You know, you sat up here, you turned it like this. It looks a little bit like a carriage, like, wow, we could get just a few horses off this. That was the first engineering challenge. You don't have a horse, how do you turn it now? And they had this device. Wow. Probably a release on the engine to get you going. Once it starts, it'll engage. It's chain. So it looks like somewhat of a combination between a horse carriage and a bicycle. But that shouldn't surprise us. Those were the big technologies at the time. In fact, Daimler, all right, who would design the first four-wheel automobile on your right, Lord, that does look a lot like a horseless carriage, right? I'm sure when the horse carriage manufacturers saw this first time, they didn't think too much of it. Probably guessed that they would make carriages for the automobile. Someone else would provide them the motor. There are very few of those that actually were able to do that. Over here, this motorcycle, you can see it's got more of a bike feel to it in some ways. Man, would you imagine riding anywhere on all that wood? How painful that would have been. There's the leather seat, but goodness gracious. And then they got like trainer wheels on the side here. Here's the gear going through that chain. And in this case, this one, like we said, looks like a carriage and looks like bike tires. So his first vehicle was actually a motorcycle and his first V-slat engine. Now, again, I wouldn't want to turn that. That would have been a real job turning those. But I make a point about technology. These, of course, look like bikes and horseless carriages because that was their existing technology. When the folks that started Facebook, he was just really taking what had been at Harvard for decades and decades. It's called the Freshman Red Book. You were handed that if you got into Harvard. You break down the names and friends and people that you know and little things about them, and you write it down. He just automated that, which is kind of amazing. He just took that and put it online. Now, he quickly realized that you need to share ideas and came up with a lot more. So let's give Zuckerberg his credit. But it was just recognizing and to change it. That was Facebook. So my point to that, and the reason why you see Facebook on here, is not that it's not necessarily a bad thing. These look like horseless carriage and bikes. That's to be expected. It's only after the technology starts to merge that we really does it start driving in its own. There it is. This is Daimler-Benz. You know, what's cool about this, I just want to say, is Wilhelm Maybach joined Benz manufacturing. So Daimler-Benz, and you know, you get Daimler-Benz. All right, we call them Mercedes-Benz today, short a lot of times. Notice too, the high-end, the really high-end Benzes are called Maybachs, and that's after one of the founders. All right. So I just think it's kind of cool, a car company that was over 100 years old now. In America, we started producing these in the 1990s. All right. In the 1890s, I should say, in America, did we start really getting large scale. First one was the Oldsmobile. And in 1901, they sold 425 cars. 4 years later, they're selling 5,000 cars. And they finally they were the first, which is kind of sad. They went out of business. GM shut them down in 2010 or so. So, Kind of sad. They were around, the oldest American car company until they went out of business. And notice the coach that was once king of the road, now it's the Oldsmobile. This is the king of the road, now it's these Oldsmobiles. You know, in 1900, it could cost thousands of dollars. Only rich could afford them. Here's something else that's kind of amazing about these cars. When back in the day, I mean, 120 years ago, you know, almost 120 years ago, 110 years ago, anyways. Not only did this have a tool chest in the back and a place to change out the tires. Look at those are wagon wheels. I mean, you couldn't really go up to speed on those things today. All right. That's a Rolls Royce, by the way. Look at the lanterns. I mean, that's just old technology. That's a lantern like you think about. You hang up a lantern like carriages used to have. They would recommend, if you go anywhere in the car, not only did you need to take air for repairing the tires and fixing flats, we'd all expect that. Oil, well, okay. Sometimes you have a can of oil in the back of your car just in case you need it. But they wanted grease. They wanted gasket material. They wanted you to take a full tool set with you, everything. Because there was a very good chance this car was going to break down and the mechanic needed to be able to repair anything on the car and a fly. And so that person became a chauffeur because the wealthy just couldn't afford them. Could afford the wealthy, didn't want the car to break down among their friends and be embarrassed, and they didn't want to bother. You know, they just wanted to get where they would like to go. So they didn't really drive for drive's sake. It was a way to socialize. It was a way to become point A to point B. Over time now, cars get better and better, and now you wouldn't dream of taking a whole tool set with you. You wouldn't take gasket material. It's funny, people will say, they built things back in the old days. I had a grandfather that's owned a mechanic shop. His dad did. And no, he always would say, and this was in the 80s and 90s, said, no, cars are built much better today than they were. And I would say today, they're even built better then. You can have a car, I sold my Avalanche truck at 240,000 miles. Someone else buying and driving it today. They'll last. They really, you can get a couple hundred. When I was a kid, you got to 100,000, you were getting rid of the car. Today, no, it'll run fine. So, I think we have a nostalgia, but my point to that was, one, they're built better today, but two, I think it's interesting, back early on, you had to have a chauffeur who was a mechanic. People were using them, were kind of disinterested in them. Now, we're going to come back to the point in a minute, because this started to change when people took an interest in driving. But today, didn't we just talk about how many people want to get a license? Now, your class, you have a group of you want to get your license. You're excited about getting your license. My point to you would be, there's a lot of people who aren't. So it's like we're coming full circle again. That car right here, the average person had to be wealthy, didn't really know how to take care of it, didn't make any decisions, had a chauffeur driving them around. Some ways we're going back to that with autonomous cars, that the software is going to make all the decisions for you. And the people who are going to be using it are going to be disinterested. All right, we'll get to that and how we might use it. So for example, with self-driving cars, we could envision that big cities could have a fleet of self-driving cars just driving around constantly, picking people up like for Uber. Something to think about. All right. Now, then rolls in Henry Ford, who's able to drop the price. He does two things that are really smart. One, he develops the assembly line. Let's give him credit. You know, that's an important part of engineering. Sometimes it's not inventing the widget, it's figuring out the best way to make said widget so it gets in most people's hands. You've heard me say this in class. I'll say it 1,000 times. I'm less impressed with somebody who has $2 million. Each car costs $2 million. It should be impressive. If the car is $2 million, you should do all kinds of things. I'm impressed with that car. I think it's an amazing car. But I'm also super impressed with somebody who comes up with a fun, drivable car that's neat looking, everything, and it's 30 grand, 25 grand, or 35 grand. Because that's where a hard thing is. It's one thing to make something exotic by hand. Henry Ford figured out how to do it up and down assembly line, which really changed how fast we could make things. It made it possible for the average person to buy a car and to get this mobility. Now, we can all argue later here, was that really great on the environment? But this did give us the mobility, all right? Okay. Factory workers were paid $5 a day. It's annoying. Enough to save and buy their own car. That was a very high wage back in the day. $5 a day. His argument was, I pay them well, they can keep buying my cars. They can buy stuff. Very a capitalistic notion. Look, if they're making good money, they can go out, buy stuff, which is going to help the economy, which is going to help me get wealthier, the whole 9 yards. And really, it did work for quite a while. Any questions so far, guys? Just go ahead and write them or raise your hand. All right. So Model T Ford, by then you could get them different colors. Beginning, they were all black. Get any color you want as long as it's black. You know, and when he tried to save on this assembly line, it wasn't just simply putting people one after another. We'll put one piece on, we'll get really fast at it. It's subtle things. It's, hey, we're getting all these ball bearings for our cars. We need them in building the cars. Let's make sure they box them a certain size. Why? Because we're going to pull the wood off those boxes and make the floorboards for our car. And we're going to specify what kind of box it has to be. So it was a way to save them money and make it cheaper. Another one is, hey, Henry Ford is famous for saying, you make your car, you can have a color you want as long as it's black. And every one of his cars were painted black. Why? If I paint them different colors, that costs us more money. And he was trying to drive down the price of these cars, so everybody could have one. $15 million of these sold by 1927. 15 million in a country of 30 million, of 100 million people. It's crazy that you would have that percentage of the population. 100 million people, most of those people can't drive. Silly notifications. Something we also should point out, and I can remember my grandfather telling me this in the early 90s. He said the early cars were steam and electric. That's, I don't know, you guys would even know this band, but, oh, Lord. I'm trying to ride the storm out. Oh, what's the name of the band? Your parents would know the band. It was actually an old car company. It'll come back to me in a few minutes, and I can tell you that. But when people think that we've been driving gasoline cars the whole time, it wasn't. Early Ford made steam and electric cars, made more of those than they did gasoline. Here he is sitting on an electric one right up front there. You can see the batteries are all set up. But once oil started being refined, especially at the turn of the century, we started bringing in oil, started changing it in the 1920s. That oil became such a dominant force. You had gas stations and infrastructure that they converted over time to all oil. All right. 15 million is already crazy. Yep. Which is 103 years old. Who is 103? My grandfather? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Tim. What do you mean by 103 years old? Someone also said the Beatles. Okay, I'm confused there. Guys, if you'll help me out there, I appreciate it. Can you explain to me what you're talking about, guys? All right, so I'm not sure I can follow that, but that's cool. It's all good. Which brings me to the central irony of this point. Tesla reintroduces the electric car. People say, wow, Tesla brings out the electric car. Everybody's going crazy. He's trying to build those so he can have batteries. They are struggling with manufacturing an affordable car, something that Ford was very good at. You know, I think a little bit Tesla's learning. I think the other car manufacturing companies are saying, yeah, it's one thing to make a few, it's another thing to manufacture them in the quantities. And we might have learned something over the last 100 years. So it'll be interesting to see any other new tech software companies get in the car building business. Apple keeps rumored to coming out with a car. I'm not sure they are. That's not Esha. Oh no, the band. No, thank you. Not the Beatles. Thank you very much. REO Speedwagon. That was it. You prompted my brain, so thank you very much. REO Speedwagon. You can ask your parents about it. They'll know who that band is. That was actually a car. It was a truck manufacturer. That was steam and electric. All right. So what goes around comes around. Tesla is struggling with what the other manufacturers did. How can we make this so the average people can buy one? All right. Now, this is according to Google, right? Produced by IGH. But when you think about software, there's two parts to this. There's the development phase, and there's the operational phase. So, you know, whether it be robotics or drone, machine vision, AI neural networks, they're developing that software that can be used in these things, the operational phase. Location technology, self-driving car maps, wireless updates, cybersecurity. Those are all necessary in order to autonomous. You do not want your car being hacked into it. You do not want to draw, you know, you need to be able to locate your drone where it's going. You need to be able to push out an update. Oh my, we have a problem with their car. Boom. Ideally, you would have the cars learn from each other. That's one of the reasons you use the model aviation's gone to. Right now, there's 60, on a given day, there's 64,000 jet airliners in the sky, which is phenomenal when so few times they ever fall out of the sky. Whenever they do, which is about every total 2 billion miles, they set everybody down and say, we're going to get to what caused the accident. And by doing this, we can learn from it and prevent the next accident. Something the aviation company totally embraced. Something I think medicine could do better about. Telling us what happened, why it happened, and then sharing what and why it happened so everybody else does. Like, why not think we make all stimulant pills one shape and all depressive pills a different shape? So, or different colors. So that way a nurse is given medicines, maybe given the wrong thing, and she can look at it and go, why are we giving this person a stimulant when clearly their heart's racing already? Maybe that helps. It's little things like that. It's just getting those good workflows going, and airplanes do a great job with that. All right? So when we have this kind of cloud technology, this is going to help us learn a lot more. So as they're doing through this, my point to all that was going to be they're going to need to share this information so we can reduce wrecks, we can have updates, we can get it rolling. All right? And that way we can drive down the number of accidents like we did with aviation. When your folks tell you it is more dangerous to drive the airport than it is to get an airplane, That's a legitimate, true story. Sometimes hard for people. Now, let's look at the growth that's been going on. All right. AVs by 215 and 220, we're going to see why in a minute, are going to be in industrial fleets. Don't be surprised if it's trucks that are first. We can talk about that in a little bit why. All right. Manufacturers are going to start looking at the impact of, well, if we got self-driving cars and new mobility models begin to emerge. What they mean by that is, I guess it's already happening in Japan, but imagine if you live in a big city or just around, you pick an area, you're Matthews. And around downtown Matthews, there's 4 or 5 cars sitting there, ready to give you a ride whenever you want one. You put it in the app, you touch it on your phone, click, click, click. Suddenly, it's hard to believe the iPhone's only been around 10 years, isn't it? Anyways, suddenly you put in your phone, car comes up, you jump in the car, drives you home, comes back. If you had that ability, we got the price down. That's going to change if you're going to drive a car or not. Now, I'm with everybody that put their hand up and said, I can't wait to drive. I couldn't wait to drive. I love to drive. To me, it's a bunch of fun. But a lot of people don't feel that way. All right? Someone says, my cousin is working on self-driving vehicles. Great. What area, Mateo? You got a cousin working on, what area is he working on? Think trucks. Is he up in Pennsylvania? Carnegie Mellon has a real strong, California does too, but Carnegie Mellon has a huge presence in autonomous cars. All right. So, 2015, 2020. My goodness, folks. Some of you won't even still have graduated by then. Some of you have. You'll still all be in college when you're going to see industrial fleets of self-driving cars possibly starting to be developed. Okay, that's no worries. You don't know. Then from 2020, 2030, which first glance 2030, that's far away. That's only 13 years away. 12 and a half now. Okay, after sales services reshaped. Again, if people aren't driving as many new cars, then car dealers make all their money presently, make most of their money on your servicing your new car. They really don't make a lot on the new cars. So they make their money on servicing the cars. Well, again, if we're not buying that many, you're not having to service any cars, that might mean we don't need as many car dealers. What I think is fascinating is insurance will change. If we start making self-driving cars so they're a lot safer, instead of worrying about insuring you and I as much, they still will always insure us. We have state laws that require it. They may spend more of their time getting big insurance with saying, we're going to insure GM. So if your self-driving car gets hit or hits somebody, you don't get sued in oblivion. Right? Next. Remember we talked about a factory, getting supply, getting stuff shipped in? We're back to that again. If it's automated, you can get your supply chains maybe even tighter. So things get there because now we can have trucks that drive all night because it's run by a robot. We, the robots, never getting sleepy. Robot's always going to be safe. It's going to get there when you want it. All right? Then, now here's between 2030 and 2050, and I wouldn't be surprised. I bet you it's closer to 2030 than 2050. You're going to have cars that are very what we call self. From a practical standpoint, they're going to help you drive a lot. I.e., you're sitting in rush hour traffic and the car just inches along. That's when a self-driving car is pretty cool. Now, they argue parking space is going to be reduced with self-driving cars. I'm not sure I'm buying that. Because they're not counting the fact that cities keep, Charlotte, I think, gets 108 people every day. 108 people, most of them have a car. Now, maybe with autonomous, most of them maybe won't, and that will matter. But that's still going to fill up a lot of the existing car spaces. Okay? Now, they're saying vehicle crashes fall by 90%. Let's hope it's that high. But I would even tell you, if it falls by 30%, it's worth it. In 2 years, we kill more people in car accidents than everybody was killed in the Vietnam War. In 10 years, it's everybody killed in every war we fought in. So anything that can reduce those car accidents is going to be a big deal. And the final, and I love always these unintended consequences. If you're familiar with an automatic car and you sit in there and you can nod off while you're riding around in this autonomous car and because you're not worried about it, that's incredible. So you're going to be much more comfortable with robots doing things in your life. I mentioned this in class one time, and I still believe it. If your dog could talk to you, have a regular conversation, and don't say when your dog barks and wags his tail, you can read his mind. I'm sure you can. That's not the same thing as you walk in the door and the dog looks at you and says, hey, how about the Panthers? If your dog could talk, would you treat it differently? The answer is yes. If your computer can talk and hold a real conversation, not Alexa conversation, I think you'll treat technology different. Any questions? All right. Okay, let me get this here. Pop this back up. All right. Steering, braking, and acceleration are called actuation. A-C-T-U-A-T-I-O-N. Actuation. And that's in some ways the easiest. That is, how do we automate turning the wheel? How do we brake? How do we accelerate? Those are actually technical problems ago. Those are the easier ones on this. The next thing is cloud and updating the cloud learning. Cloud learning. And this whole idea that we're going to run all this data through server farms. Well, that can get you and you can use it, not only you can make high different maps, you know what the traffic's doing, you can get better object detection. Right now, a self-driving car cannot really understand the difference of a grown adult walking on the street and a toddler running around. That car is going to be measuring both those risks just the same. When in reality, we know a toddler is much more liable to go on the street than an adult. Or if some woman is walking with a baby carriage close to the edge of the road, it's going to just treat that like a box. So this is, you're using this cloud to help that learn that. And because what you want to do is the software to keep teaching itself. Oh, when this happens, I don't want that to happen, I will make a change. Now, there's this perception and object analysis is just like the baby and the baby carriage. How's that different from something else in the robot learning this? This is the one that Carnegie Mellon students who graduated with a specialty in robotic vision have been getting, they have some work experience, are getting 200 grand, which is hard to believe. All right. Oops. Let's go back here. All right. Bear with me. And this, let's go back here. And some of the reasons we have features, some features are coming on faster than other features. And this is what the public wants. You know, car companies want to sell you a car. They'll give you what you want. So it's interesting. We're less interested in night growth. Night vision has grown the least amount. But look how much these other ones have grown. Adaptive light vision that changes under circumstances. And demand for advanced driver systems, you know, like it stops the car, lane warning, say, hey, you're slipping in the lane warning, keeps the right distance, is looking all around your car so you know if you're about to run into something. 48% demand since then. And this is the highest growth is in, you know, which is hard to believe. 166 surround views. So that way you can see everybody around you. Distance, lane departure, night vision, those things. So, you know, the customer somewhat dictates that, what we want to do. Oops. Wait a minute, I just... All right. This is not really quite... So, let's go back. I mean to do this. So I'm going to go back so that I may have jumped over here. It's like, what? All right. And let's go back to this because I skipped. I kind of jumped ahead over that one. But I just wanted, it was a good point. I didn't mind doing it because I wanted you to see, hey, not all these things, you need elements of an autonomous system. Users don't always want the same things we want. But let's go back to what's in there. One thing you need is localization, and mapping has to be absolute top-notch, be it clouding, whatever. The engineers are going to have problems with this of how do we automate this so we immediately know when there's a change in the maps. That will help. Not surprisingly, we talk about, hey, how are we going to learn if we have the robots driving these cars are going to learn? They're going to be using analytics to learn, as we will, as the engineers out there will practice. So they're going to monitor autonomous systems. They'll use analytics and then tell you this part of the car is going to fail. That when we see these symptoms, 91% of the time, the car fails within 2 weeks. So that can tell you and your autonomous car, hey, I need to take you into the shop because you're about to break, which is pretty cool. Another thing on analytics, which people really realize, you have a black box in your car. If it's a modern car in the last 10 years, you have a black box in there. How long before we start pulling those out to see who really caused the accident? Because the minute you have that black box, you can tell when the car braked. Well, so just like in an airline crash, it tells us a lot what's going on. You were going really fast there. Look in the black box. We can see it right there. And that gets back to the analytics. All right, the operating system. Well, the operating system, honestly, has gotten more complicated than some of the regular operating systems. Well over 1 million lines of code in a normal car today. We're getting, so, you know, that's been going on for some time, I suppose, but we get to computer hardware. My big point to that is you're going to need it in your car, but it's gotten so much cheaper. It continues to get cheaper. And then in terms of sensors, you have LiDAR, sonar, radar, and cameras. We'll get into that down on how those work in a little bit. All right, let me see any questions here. All right. So you can see that if you go into automating cars, there's a lot of different projects to work on that. All right? And we just mentioned this before. I'm not going to go through that. All right. This will probably be what drives automation in vehicles faster than anything else. Some of it is simply because we can't find enough truck driving people. The pay's pretty good, but it's really hard work. And therefore, people, they're having a heck of a time finding drivers. So truck manufacturers and trucking companies say, well, let's autonomize it. So let me show you this article here. Guys, we'll watch this and watch this guy driving a truck.
On the outside, this looks like your typical big rig, but once you're inside and with the simple push of a button,
if you want to push submit plan,
it turns into something that most might compare to a Transformer movie.
you actually get used to it surprisingly quickly.
It's a real-life, self-driving semi-truck taking a spin around a controlled area on the Southwest Research Institute grounds.
You'll see the truck swerve a little bit. There's a very specific technical reason for that, and the reason is that I really don't like hitting potholes.
Southwest Research Institute, along with several other research organizations, are helping the U.S.
Lincoln.
Department of Transportation create guidelines for developing automated vehicle technologies. The end goal, to make our streets safer.
I think 90% of all accidents are caused by human error, and so really robots don't get sleepy or tired or drunk or anything like that.
While these vehicles are being controlled by robots, a simple touch of the steering wheel will give you back the control.
Some people are a little worried about it, and it's kind of scary in some ways, but I think the ultimate goal behind all this is safety.
Right now, this self-driving car is able to leave the controlled area and hit the real roads on the Institute campus as long as someone is behind the wheel.
All right. So, all right, let's try to get through this part, and we might come to a good stopping point right now with this. But there are 5 levels of automation. All right? There are 5 levels of automation. Okay? And this is, if you look at this graph, it's a human being, and then this is where the autonomous car controls it. So, no automation. Steering, acceleration, deacceleration, that's all controlled by the human. Monitoring and driving environment done by the human. This is at no automation, 0. Fallback when automation fails, there's really nothing. It's just a human. If automation fails, it's a human. Automatic system and control. No, because there's no automatic system at 0 level. Where full automation is at the bottom. All those things are done by the car. Today, this is going to change. I'll tell you which one in a minute. Driver's assistance is starting to happen. And that's how I think you're going to see more and more accepting of this. When people are sitting at a party and say, man, oh man, I was driving, I turned to talk to my daughter, and this car came up and my car stopped. I'm so glad we have that. That's when the perception will change about, hey, you know, self-driving cars, people will freak out. Oh my God, I don't want a car driving without me in it. We'll talk about risk next class. But in this case, you know, how do I want to put it? It's getting people used to that driver assistance working that we say, okay, I'm going to let this machine do a better job. Because honestly, I do believe in 95% of the cases out there, it's going to do a better job than you and I can. This thing never gets bored. It never gets distracted. All right. Now, out on the drive today, we have cars that have 1 and 2. That driver assistance and partial automation. But the person is still monitoring the environment. And when the fallback fails, well, it still falls on the person. You know, and you do have some driving mode, but you can tell it to be super cautious. It's going to go slower going to use less gas, that kind of thing. Now, level 3 is just coming out. Cadillac announced a car that is what we call level 3. That is, steers, accelerates, deaccelerates on its own. Monitoring of the driver's environment is done more by the car than the person. Fallback falls to the human. Now in that Cadillac car, they have a camera right on your face to make sure that you're not reading a book or not paying attention. Because Cadillac was worried people start reading a book and start doing that. You know, down the road, you're going to get to 4, where now fallback when there's automation built in that. If there's a problem, it's automatically going to get fixed by the car. The car automatically compensates. And using analytics and all the sensors in this car, it can again tell you, hey, this part is going to wear out. And that's what's really, saying again, the newer cars last significantly longer than the older cars. Finally, full animation, all those things. It's automated systems in control. You're literally sitting there and it's driving around. You have a chauffeur, which is wild. So what comes around, goes around, comes around kind of thing. We had chauffeurs early on. Cars got more useful, much more dependable. We got rid of the chauffeurs. Now we're getting the updated chauffeur, self-driving automated cars. But we will talk more about that in the future. Let me do this before. Let me go ahead. Curious about what you thought of this webinar, just so I know for these kinds of things. All right. I'm at 79%. May 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll. Share the results. 60% liked it. 25% said, okay. And 17% said, not for me. All right, well, I'm just trying to mix things up a little bit for us. No worries. Okay. At this point, ready? Let me go ahead and see the next one on here. We'll go in and make sure that we start from here next time. Here's radar going this way in a car. Sometimes radar needs a longer distance. Ultrasound is better for, those are just sound waves very close by, work well for that. On top of your car, you're going to have a radar, camera unit, GPS unit, accelerometer. Some of that's going to be a challenge, though, because like they say, navigation aids, your GPS. Sometimes my GPS doesn't work very well. I'd be a little bit nervous about just completely committing to the GPS, but they will come up with better. They put cameras. We use those for staying in the lane. Staying in the lane. I'm trying to get out of this. Used for lane keeping and backup assistance. Can detect lanes, right? So it's tree stripes, stop signs, all that. So we use cameras quite a bit, and some of them add more and more cameras. LiDAR, it spins around and it's a 64 like lasers, but it looks a little bit like radar too. It bounces back. So there's a laser emitter, laser receiver, a mounting base, and this is kind of how it looks like from a LiDAR's perspective, everything going on in your day when you're using it. All right. Any questions? We're finishing up on that part of that today. The car that's famous for this is the new Cadillac CSX gets all the way to this point right here. It's in stage 3. You're welcome. You all have a great day. And we're going to be going with our Raspberry Pis again down the road here, but thought I would break this up a little bit, okay? So everybody have a good one now, and I'll talk to you later. You bet, Levi. Sure thing, Mateo. Hannah, have a good one.